Seeing as we are right at the end of October, it only feels right that we put out a few videos featuring some of the more terrifying creatures from Middle-earth. We even have a special Halloween Day video coming out to you on Monday based around the creation of the orcs, so keep an eye out for that one. But today we are talking about some of the nameless things and scary creatures from the world of Arda. Let's get into it.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
Everyone who has seen the popular films The Lord of the Rings will remember the Deadmen of Dunharrow, the cursed spirits inhabiting the discarded bones of corpses underneath the Dwimmelberg, the haunted mountain above it, and the spirits in the paths of the dead, a cave that admits passage to only the most brave, or perhaps it is better said, the most foolhardy and heroic. The Dark Door is obfuscated by the Stone of Eric, which leads onto the paths of the dead where the spirits cling to the discarded bones of generations, a commodity that they had not found themselves lacking in that time of great upheaval. These Deadmen of Dunharrow were pre-Numenorean men and maintained a holdfast at Dunharrow overlooking the Harrow Dale, hence the name. These pre-Numenorean culture of men lived west of the White Mountains. They were cursed by Isildur after they refused to fight with elves and men during the War of the Last Alliance. Afterwards, they so longed for death that they would have fought at the fields of Pelennor if Aragorn asked them. Though, in the literature, the Deadmen of Dunharrow allow Aragorn, Isildur's heir, to pass them by, and they follow him through the pass of Blackroot Vale, south to the Stone of Eric. Aragorn tells them that he will release them and hold their oaths fulfilled if they follow him to Pelagia. There the dead would fight, drive back Sauron's forces at Ford Gilrain, at Linhir, and at Pelagia. They were at the shores of the greatest river in all of Middle-earth, the Great Anduin River, and it was there that Aragorn bid them depart and be at rest. As commanded, they carried it out and gave up the bones, which collapsed softly into the dust and were swept off like sand. Now, the first time in Tolkien's writings that we hear about nameless things in Middle-earth is when Gandalf speaks of them in The Hobbit. Even Sauron knows them not. They are older than he. The very point of the introduction of these beings into the mythology is that there is nothing to be said about them, who, what, or how they were. They are mentioned in 2 lines, but that is enough for Tolkien to add the concept of nameless to his world. But nameless here does not just refer to being without names. It more properly in this case refers to the state of being utterly, or almost so, unknowable. The term used for them in the drafts is dark things unguessed. Out of the discords of the music, not directly out of either of the themes, Eru's or Melkor's, but of their dissonance with regard one to another. Evil things appeared in Arda, which did not descend from any direct plan or vision of Melkor. They were not his children, and therefore, since all evil hated him too. When Gandalf speaks of the nameless things, he is probably speaking of something that is a mystery even to himself, which allows him to say the name of Sauron as they are so coeval. It is possible and must be seriously considered that Gandalf is simply wrong. First of all, this is not Tolkien telling us that Sauron is unaware of them, but the question as to how Gandalf would know them to be older than Sauron remains, particularly in light of what we would later get in the Ainulin Dale and creation of drama that sees the Valar and the Maiar created before the world, before Ea and Arda itself. The nameless things are likely abominations of Morgoth created by slow corruption and torture in the First Age, or either the evil that would manifest itself in Arda by the discord within the music of the Aina, as Ungoliant might represent beings of this kindred. The Silmarillion mentions at times that there were many unspeakable horrors that inhabited the depths of Utumno, and even mentions that there were secret caverns that Melkor built under Utumno that were so well hidden that even the Valar themselves could not find them. This would allow many of the mysterious entities living in those caverns to live on for many ages, hidden from the outside world by living in the depths of the world. I think that Melkor made them some time before he corrupted Sauron, so I assume that they came into existence before Sauron even went into Middle-earth, so that's why the nameless things are said to be older than Sauron himself, and since the Valar never knew about them, it would be logical that Sauron and Maiar wouldn't either. This makes me wonder if there are even more hidden horrors that Melkor kept secret from the rest of Arda's beings, and it's really fascinating to think about how there could have been even more unknown horrors that live in Tolkien's world. Outside of what we have from Gandalf, there is a similar description of riddles in the Dark chapter of The Hobbit. Even in the tunnels and caves the goblins have made for themselves, there are other things living unbeknown to them that have sneaked in from outside to lie up in the dark. Some of these caves too go back in their beginnings to ages before the goblins, who only widened them and joined them up with passages, and the original owners are still there in odd corners, slinking and nosing about. Contrast this statement by the Hobbit's narrator with what we get in the Valaquenta from the Silmarillion. Now Melkor began the delving and building of a vast fortress, deep under earth, beneath dark mountains where the beams of Luin were cold and dim. That stronghold was named Utumno. And though the Valar knew naught of it yet, nonetheless the evil of Melkor and the blight of his hatred flowed out thence, and the spring of ardour was marred. Green things fell sick and rotted, and rivers were choked with weeds and slime, and fens were made rank and poisonous, the breeding place of flies, and forests grew dark and perilous, the haunts of fear, and beasts became monsters of horn and ivory, and dyed the earth with blood. Then the Valar knew indeed that Melkor was at work again, and they sought for his hiding place. This leaves us with the formidable task of seeking out the Nameless, and trying to bring attention to them. Rather, we have decided to introduce some of the less known but fascinating creatures of Middle-earth which have not been revealed in the popular film adaptations, so for anyone who is looking for deeper lore, we have you covered. First, there are the Barrow-wights, which are not found in the films despite the part they play in the books in general and the Fellowship of the Ring in particular. Frodo and his companions pass through the Barrow Downs to get to the town of Bree. Barrow-wights were evil spirits which served the Witch King. They possessed the bones of ancient kings and queens of Cardolan, an ancient land that was once populated by the Dunedain, whose people are represented most prominently in the story by Aragorn. The spirits which possessed these corpses were to ensure the lands were never resettled by men. They were adorned in faded jewellery and livery, patrolling the ancient crypts, and were well known to jealously guard their lands and hunt those who trespassed therein. The spirits were kept there to ensure that those lands would never be resettled by men. Wights would paralyse unsuspecting travellers and take them back to their holdings, dressing their captives in white robes and jewels to prepare them for ritual sacrifice, and though most would remain unconscious throughout this morbid process, if a victim should wake before the completion of the ritual, they would be powerless to fight back and unable to move, forced to wait for death, which came swiftly. This alone is enough to make the Barrow-wights a terrifying addition to Middle-earth, and something that no one wished to encounter on their journeys. This brings us to a creature of primordial darkness, a prime candidate for cosmic horror in Middle-earth, as this is darkness with no master. Perhaps the most powerful and terrifying of creatures ever to come from Tolkien's imagination, Ungoliant is a malevolent spirit that took the form of a giant spider. She was so evil that she hated light itself and would devour it where she could. If one could imagine a black hole in the form of a creature, it would be Ungoliant. Alongside Morgoth, the Dark Lord of the First Age, she destroyed the two trees of Valinor, sucking the sap from Telperion and Lorelin, from the pierced trees as though it was blood. Morgoth would kill King Finwë and steal the Silmarils and flee into Middle-earth. There Morgoth refused to honour his side of the agreement with Ungoliant. He agreed to give and to give with both hands, but held the Silmarils back. This of course led to the massive spider attacking Morgoth, and came close to ridding the world of his shadow for all time after he was defeated by Ungoliant. The terror of his screams, which he uttered at the start of the onslaught, brought forth Balrogs to reinforce their master and spare him the wrath of Ungoliant, who would likely have killed Morgoth had he not been reinforced in time. Unable to take on the Balrogs and Morgoth, she fled to the darkest region known in Arda, that of Nan Dungotheb. There she bred with the giant spiders and established her own domain, a domain of darkness, bathed in the unlight of her webs. It is believed she eventually fed on herself in the great, insatiable hunger which drove her. The Nameless Things differ for the obvious reasons that Ungoliant and the Barrow-wights are named, which gives the impression that Tolkien intended them to be a mystery, a piece of lore that was intended to reward careful readers and attentive fans alike. What can be said of the Nameless Things is merely that they existed. And even if Sauron did not know them, how can this be true, as Sauron is one of the Ainur? He was present for the themes of music which predated the creation of the world. This raises the distinct possibility that the Nameless Things existed beyond the world of Arda and dwelt in the depths of the void, coming into the world of Middle-earth from the outside in. Okay guys, that's pretty much all we have for you today. As I said at the start, as it's the end of October, we wanted to give you a video that covered the really dark and terrifying things that came from Tolkien's imagination. I really hope you enjoyed this one. As always, time has come to thank all of our patrons and channel members. Your support means the absolute world. You are funding the short fantasy film that we are working on, inspired by the worlds of J.R.R. Tolkien. If you're a patron, hopefully by now you will have seen some behind the scenes content, because the day after I recorded this video we went location scouting, and hopefully we have shared some footage from that with you guys. Again, thanks as always for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.